Hello there. Dave is just a bit older than me, and I've known him for longer than I can remember. One of my abiding memories is of a Sunday afternoon in the 70s when we were both teenagers, and Dave was pacing up and down complaining that Sunday was such a boring day with nothing to do and nowhere to go. Well, times change. Now on a Sunday it's not just church, roast lunch and doze over the papers. We can shop. We can meet friends at a restaurant or a bar. We can take the family to a castle or a theme park. Well, we could until the lockdown. But now we're more likely to be stuck at home, and every day's a bit like Sunday. Sorry, Dave. At least you've got Google now. It's a strange world, isn't it? One of the pivotal moments in Old Testament history is the fall of Jerusalem in 587 BC. At a political and military level, this was Babylonian empire building. After many years of threats and a long and brutal siege, they captured the city. They broke down its wall. They burned God's temple. They pillaged numerous treasures from the temple and the royal palaces, and they executed or deported many of the leaders and key citizens. But at a spiritual level, something else was going on. The final chapter of 2 Chronicles puts it like this. The Lord, the God of their fathers, sent word to them through his messengers again and again, because he had pity on his people and on his dwelling place. But they mocked God's messengers, despised his words, and scoffed at his prophets, until the wrath of the Lord was aroused against his people, and there was no remedy. He brought up against them the king of the Babylonians, who killed their young men with the sword in the sanctuary, and spared neither young man nor young woman, old man or aged. God handed all of them over to Nebuchadnezzar. The writer of Chronicles, there charting Israel's decline and fall, is in no doubt that this was God's doing, not Nebuchadnezzar's military prowess. But then a little later in the chapter comes a very interesting comment. He carried into exile to Babylon the remnant who escaped from the sword, and they became servants to him and his sons until the kingdom of Persia came to power. The land enjoyed its Sabbath rests. All the time of its desolation it rested until the 70 years were completed, in fulfillment of the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah. The land enjoyed its Sabbath rests. The law of Israel, the 10 Commandments, and the many other teachings derived from them laid down that one day in 7 was to be different for everyone, rich and poor alike, a day for rest and for worship. Not only that, every 7th year was to be a fallow year, with no planting or reaping. The land itself was to rest, and the people were to trust God to provide for them. And after every seventh year, in other words, every 50 years, there was a year of Jubilee, when debts were to be cancelled and property was to be returned to its original owner. It's a fascinating pattern, where rest, worship, faith and justice were built into the rhythms of life, a pattern which would prevent a few people accumulating great wealth while others were reduced to servitude and poverty. And it's a very different model from our perceived norm of a 24/7, always-on, market-driven world which never stops, where business and busyness are the only things that seem to matter. Israel had failed to live God's way, and the exile to Babylon was the outcome, God's punishment on their rebellion. And as part of it, he gave the land its time to rest. So, is that part of what's happening with coronavirus? Could this be a warning to the modern world? Ironically, a wake-up call on the need to slow down? Could it be we desperately need to learn to say enough to the frantic activity that never lets up, so that we can rediscover rest, worship, faith and justice, and build a different way of life in which those things matter? It's something to bear in mind while every day feels a little bit like Sunday. Let's pray. Father, you made us and you know how we function best. You made us to trust you and to worship you. Help us to model that behaviour in the middle of the current crisis. You call us to stand for justice in your world. Help us to know how to do that so that your voice may be heard and your will may shape the society which emerges in the months ahead. Amen. Until next time, take care and trust God.